Hi, brothers and sisters. This is Ryan Zell of Christian Virtue and Grace. This presentation is called 12 Things You Should Know About the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has 1.3 billion members, making it the largest Christian church. Taking into account all persons who claim to be Christians, the majority are Catholics. Apostolic Christians who consider themselves Catholic but in schism with the Bishop of Rome make up 16% of all those who claim to be Christians. Here are 12 things everyone should know about the Catholic Church. These facts are historically verifiable and are not dependent on a theologic or sectarian perspective. None can be disputed from a historical perspective. As a reminder, if you like this video, do not forget to click the like button, and if you are not subscribed to this channel, please consider doing so. Some Protestants believe that the Catholic Church was created by Constantine, but where did the Catholic Church come from? What are its origins? The Catholic Church was founded by Christ upon St. Peter and is the original Christian church. Jesus founded a church upon Simon Bar-Jonah, whom he renamed Cephas, which means rock in Aramaic. Cephas is translated as Peter in the English language. The account of this event appears in Matthew 16:15-19. Next to Christ, St. Peter is the most important figure in the church and is mentioned 191 times in the New Testament and appears first in every list of the apostles. In Matthew 17, Christ informs St. Peter that neither he nor Peter owe the temple tax, but pays the tax for Peter and himself from a coin found in the mouth of a bass, lest the non-payment of the temple tax cause scandal. In Luke 22, Christ prays for St. Peter alone so that through him the other apostles are strengthened in their faith. St. Peter was the chief apostle of Christ and the prince of the apostles, and upon Christ's ascension into heaven, a new temple tax was founded according to the Jewish halakhic law, which St. Peter acted as both the Nasi and the Ab Beit Din of that temple. The temple had 120 members and a Beit Din of 70 disciples who were the Talmudim, who were taught by Christ during the 3 years as their rabbi. Talmudim means a student of the oral tradition, a disciple of a rabbi. As the Nasi of the temple, St. Peter was the prince and the Ab Beit Din, and he was the father of the congregation, or the Pope. Pope just means father in English, a word derived from the informal Latin word papa, meaning father. Etymology of the word Pope is derived from the French papa or pape, which is why a small child would call his father informally. The 120 not only fulfill the halakhic legal requirements, they are the anashi kenes habagah. Due to persecution, St. Peter went to Antioch, where he established the patriarchate. Thus, St. Peter became the first patriarchate in Christianity. When St. Peter went to Rome, he established the patriarchate and his see in Rome. Patriarchy is merely a social order in which the head is by a father. Thus, the earliest Christians recognized St. Peter as the Pope or father of Christianity. The word Christian was synonymous with Catholic for the first 1,050 years of Christianity. There are many Protestants who do not consider Catholics Christians. Imagine that. But are Catholics a denomination of Christianity? The Catholic Church is not a denomination of Christianity, but the pre-denominational Christian Church. The Catholic Church was the original apostolic church founded by the apostles. The apostles, following the divine commission, established churches during their travels from Hispania to India and from Ethiopia to the Caucasus. Each of these churches which existed could trace their origin through their bishop to one of the apostles of Christ through apostolic succession. The church began calling itself the Catholic Church during the apostolic age. St. Ignatius of Antioch, a disciple of both St. Peter and St. John, ordained by St. Peter as the Bishop of Antioch, tells us that the name of the church was the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church was synonymous with Christianity. When Christianity was mentioned, it was always meant to be the Catholic Church. No other Christian church existed apart from the Catholic Church. The term the church was always referred to as the Catholic Church. Catholicism is the non-denominational Christianity from which all the denomination sects and cults which claim to be Christian descended from. However, through Christian history, heretics and Gnostics abounded, and each of these heretical and Gnostic groups called themselves Christians, though none were authentically Christians, and Christians did not view them as Christians. Most of the heretical and Gnostic groups were regional. They elected or erected their own churches in regions in which they existed. Saint Cyril of Jerusalem, in his catechetical lectures, instructs Christians when visiting other cities not to inquire as to where the church is, but the Catholic Church is, so as to avoid the wretched Gnostics and heretics who pass themselves off as Christians. He further states that the Catholic Church is the particular name of the Holy Church, the mother of us all, which is the spouse of our Lord Jesus Christ. It was the popes who created the patriarchates of Antioch, Rome, Alexandria, Jerusalem, and Constantinople. Since Antioch was the see of Peter, Antioch was considered a patriarchate ever since. When St. Peter went to Rome, Rome became a patriarchate. Where Peter was, he established his patriarchate, the see which governed other sees. Wherever Peter's seat was, it was the reference point of the Orthodox faith. At the Council of Nicaea, the papal legate Hosius of Cordoba raised Alexandria to the patriarchate. In 451, the Pascasinius of Liberbium, the papal legate presiding over the Council of Chalcedon, raised Jerusalem to the patriarchate, and in that same year, Pope Leo the Great raised Constantinople to the patriarchate. The 5 patriarchates, each created by the actions of the popes and his legates, came to be known as the Patriarchy. In 431, the Nestorian Schism occurred, which created the churches of the East. In 451, the Monophysite Schism created Oriental Orthodoxy. The Great Schism of 1094 created Eastern Orthodoxy. In 1521, the Protestant Reformation created Protestantism and all the various Protestant denominations, sects, and cults which we see today in the West. Each schism is a heresy broke from the Catholic Church. Who defined who a Christian is? Who is a competent authority? The Catholic Church defined who is a Christian and the creedal belief of all Christians. Anyone can claim to be a Christian. Many heretics claimed to be Christians. Many today call themselves Christians, but are not technically Christians. But who really is a Christian? What belief should a person profess and hold on to so that they may be considered a Christian? These were some of the questions early Christian councils dealt with. At the First Council of Nicaea and the First Council of Constantinople, the bishops of the church defined who was considered a Christian and formulated the creed which would enumerate the beliefs of a Christian. Conversely, if one did not accept the beliefs set forth in this creed, they would not just be a heretic, but a non-Christian. This creed became known as the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed, or simply the Nicene Creed. To be considered a Christian, a person must have been baptized with the correct form, matter, and intent, and believe what a Christian ought to believe. One becomes, by virtue of their baptism, a Christian provided he or she accepts the beliefs set forth in the creed, which they recite at their baptism. Thus, baptism is how one is initiated into the Catholic faith. The Nicene Creed provides a statement of beliefs that all Christians must accept to be considered a Christian. The acceptance or rejection of this distinguishes Christians from non-Christians. Christians recite this ancient Christian creed on Sundays and major feast days at their liturgies as a profession of their Christian faith. Who in Christianity decided what is heretical in Christianity? The Catholic Church decided what is orthodox and heterodox in Christianity. A heresy is an opinion or belief which formally or materially denies a core dogma or doctrine of Christianity. Most heresies were confined to regions and did not affect the church as a whole, and the church was the standard of orthodoxy in Christianity. It is the Catholic Church that decided which beliefs were orthodox and which were heretical in Christianity. Much of the heresies originated innocently enough as a method to explain Christological or Trinitarian concepts which were hard to understand, and eventually these heresies took a life of their own. Since most of such heresies were confined to specific regions, such heresies were dealt with by the regional synods of bishops. However, Arianism, Adoptionism, Apollinarianism, Monophytism, Nestorianism required greater church councils to deal with these heresies. Most heresies simply died out and are found referenced only in the writings of the church fathers. Every belief or opinion which is considered a heresy is considered heresy because the Catholic Church officially condemned and declared the belief or opinion to be a heresy. There was a recognized competent authority in Christianity, and that authority was the Pope and the Catholic Church. Without such an authority, a heresy could simply have been someone's opinion or belief which another Christian thought was incompatible with Christian teaching. However, since an authority existed which was recognized as such and deemed competent to adjudicate on the matter, we today have officially condemned heresies which are not merely the opinion of individuals, but by the judgment of the Church. Who gave Christians the Bible? The Catholic Church produced the Bible, and it is its guardian. There were many writings that were considered New Testament scripture. Churches in each region had their own New Testament canon. Several lists of what persons believed to be the New Testament canon existed. The first person to correctly list the New Testament canon as it appears today was St. Athanasius, Bishop of Alexandria, in 362 AD. Until that time, each list of books was missing books and had additional books no longer considered to be canonical. It was St. Pope Damasus I who issued the Dectrum Damasii in 382 AD, which contained the Bible canon used in the city of Rome, and called the bishops to the Council of Rome to begin formalizing the Bible canon to bring uniformity to what was read in the churches. The bishops of the church held several councils, and at Rome, the canon was also called the Carthaginian canon, was accepted as the formal Catholic canon by the East and the West. At the Council of Carthage in 397 AD, prior to 400 AD, there was not a single known Greek Bible codex that had the correct books of the Bible. The Bible was preserved by the church and its monks, who diligently copied and recopied the Bible in monastic scriptoriums at a time when no printing presses existed. One monk dictated while several took down the dictation. A Bible took 3 years to complete in this manner. Beginning with St. John the Evangelist in Rimini and the Vivarium Monastery in Sequelius, monks began copying and recopying Latin and Greek Bibles, writings of the Church Fathers and Greek and Latin writers, and thus preserving not only the sacred and theological writings, but much of secular Greek and Roman history and literature. Where did the Western civilization come from? Who founded it? The Catholic Church is the founder of the Western civilization. When historians use the phrase Western civilization, it is used to mean the area of Europe influenced by the Western Catholic Church. Not only did the Catholic Church influence Western civilization, but she also created it out of the remains of the tattered Western Roman Empire. The popes crowned the kings who swore allegiance to him. One has to remember that it was the Pope who crowned Charlemagne, the Holy Roman Emperor, on Christmas Day in 800 AD, and thereby legitimizing the Carolingian Empire. It was Pope John XII who crowned Otto I, the Holy Roman Empire. Even the early Middle Ages was sometimes known as the Dark Ages, ended with the death of John XII and the election of Benedict V as Pope. The Franks were a barbarous Germanic pagan tribe who swept in to occupy the power vacuum created by the collapse of the Western Empire in the 5th century. The Western Church sent out missionaries to the Frankish tribes, converting them to the Catholic faith. When Clovis at first converted to Catholicism on Christmas Day, 508 AD, and he established Moravian dynasty and the Frankish kingdom, it is this kingdom that eventually gave rise to the most kingdoms of Western and Central Europe. After his conversion, he called on the 33 Catholic bishops of the church in the Frankish territory to provide his kingdom a legal framework. This was accomplished by the adaptation of the Roman law to the Frankish people and their Salic customs, and the adoption of Latin as the language of the kingdom. Clovis made all these who lived in his territory subject to the Roman law, which was administered by the 33 bishops. This framework would go on to create what we call Western civilization, a civilization influenced and built by the church. Through the efforts of the bishops and the church, the barbaric peoples of Europe adopted a more sedentary existence and established permanent settlements that developed into cities and towns. The feudalistic society came into being to provide a cooperative defense against the marauding northern hordes without having a resort to the upkeep and maintenance of a professional permanent army. Kingdoms were created and given papal recognition. In this manner, civilization came to the barbaric tribes as they established recognized boundaries within which they could settle and expect a relatively peaceful existence. Who created the legal framework for Western civilization? The Catholic Church created and maintained the legal framework of the Western civilization. When the 33 bishops of the Franks adopted Roman law and created a legal system for the Frankish kingdom, few had any idea that most of the world would come to adopt Roman law as the basis of their own legal systems. This is not the classical Roman law of the Roman Empire, but the Roman law of the Roman curial courts, which was headed by the Pope himself, of which he was the ultimate judge as the father of the law. Roman law allowed for the jus civile to incorporate the jus gentium of the Frankish people known as the Salic laws, and therefore the implementation of Roman law caused little to no disruption in the lives of the Frankish people. Furthermore, Roman law was provided flexibility in the adaptation of legislative decrees, communal laws, and natural rights of the people. In this manner, Roman law provided the framework for civil law and for the legal system in practice in Europe. All the bishops of the church were considered lawyers of both the civil and ecclesial courts and the ordinaries in their own dioceses. They were educated in both Roman and canon law as a part of their training as clergy. Thus, when the 33 bishops of the Franks created the legal framework for the kingdom, they were uniquely qualified to become judges of the ordinary courts. Priests who were educated could hear cases, settle disputes between their parishioners, and if the dispute was still contested further, they could take it to the bishops of the church, who would settle such cases in their ordinary courts. The Roman Curia sought to maintain some uniformity in the implementation of Roman law, gathered important cases, and made these available to the bishops on an ad hoc and then semi-regular basis, and thus establishing stare decisis, legal precedent within Roman law. This provided uniformity in the implementation and interpretation of the law. This factor provided merchants and traders the confidence to engage in cross-border trade, as an imperial and an impartial entity existed which could adjudicate disagreements and contracts, and such judgments would be enforced wherever the ordinary courts existed, even after bishops and emperors established their own courts. Traders and merchants often stipulated in their contracts the agreements to have any disputes which may arise heard in the ordinary courts. Due to the flexibility provided by Roman law, it was adopted by the European nations as the basis of their legal systems. Due to the influence of Roman and Europe, law has been adopted by most countries around the world as their legal system. Even common law at its nascent stage, as the Germanic laws of custom, were influenced by Roman law of the continent, and the Roman law and canon law continued to be influenced by the civil law and chancery courts of England. It was not until the 1800s that the universities of Oxford and Cambridge began providing instruction in English common law, as their students were trained in Roman law for the civil law courts rather than the common law courts. Ask yourself, where did the universities come from? What was their origin? The Catholic Church founded all the earliest universities. Beginning in the 6th century and onward, all higher education was conducted in the cathedral and monastic schools to train an educated clergy to service for the church. Each bishop founded a cathedral school for the training of his clergy, which taught Roman and canon law, theology, philosophy, and rhetoric. Abbots likewise founded monastic schools to train monks and friars. Priests, monks, and nuns provided the students an education and trained them for the clerical offices of the church. The Catholic clergy was the educated class in much of Western Europe all through the Middle Ages and early into the Classical Middle Age. These cathedral and monastic schools would be understood as being seminaries today. All the earliest universities began as these cathedral and ecclesial schools and seminaries, which eventually amalgamated as colleges and came to be recognized as universities by popes and monarchs as more and more students aspiring to receive higher education began hiring priests and monks as their private tutors. Popes, diocesan bishops, sacerdotal and monastic orders founded most of the oldest universities to provide the education demanded by these students. The primary intention of these universities was not to train the clergy for the church, but also to create an educated class that could function as bureaucrats to help administer the state. Subjects range from the liberal arts and the humanities to theology, law, and medicine. As the church opened hospitals, the church required medical doctors who were usually from the monastic orders. The University of Bologna is the oldest university which came into existence through the amalgamation of ecclesial schools in about 1050, attended by students of all nations who were taught medieval Roman law and canon law. Its motto says it all. Petrus ubique pater legum, Bologna mater, meaning St. Peter, in reference to the Pope, is everywhere the father of the law. Bologna is its mother. It was recognized as a university by a city charter in 1088, a royal charter by Frederick Barbarossa in 1158 made it official. It is the only early university that was not established by a papal bull, but through the amalgamation of law schools run by the Catholic Church. It served as the prototype university for all universities which were granted papal charters by papal bull. The University of Paris was founded upon the Cathedral School of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris and the Abbey of Saint Genevieve in Paris. The University of Paris was established in 1150 and had a multidisciplinary faculty. The Sorbonne was granted a charter by Pope Innocent III in 1215 by papal charter. The Sorbonne, the founding college of the University of Paris, until its closing in 1970 due to Marxist student riots, was regarded most prestigious university in the world, was named after the founder, Robert de Sorbonne, a Catholic theologian. The University of Salamanca was founded upon the Cathedral School in Salamanca and served as a university in 1134. The University of Salamanca was granted a charter by Pope Innocent IV in 1255 by the papal bull. Oxford University was founded by the Dominicans sent by St. Dominic, who opened Blackfriars College, the founding college of Oxford University, in 1221. Oxford University was granted a charter by Pope Innocent IV in 1254 by papal bull. Cambridge University was founded by Bishop Hugh de Balsham, the Bishop of Ely, who opened Peterhouse, the founding college of Cambridge University, in 1284. Cambridge was granted a charter by Pope Nicholas IV in 1290 by papal bull. The Catholic Church maintains a present 1,358 accredited degree-granting universities worldwide. Many previously Catholic universities have been seized and nationalized by governments across the world. The Sorbonne was shut down in 1793 by the anti-clerical regime during the Reign of Terror, which seized all church assets. In England, Henry VIII seized all church property and confiscated the assets of the Dominicans, including Blackfriars College, and shut it down. Repeated waves of anti-clericalism in Spain in the 19th century saw the University of Salamanca secularized and the clergy turned out of the schools of theology and canon law shut down. Why do we have so much of the writing of the classical age from Greece and Rome today, while very little literature exists from other cultures? That's an easy one to answer, because the Catholic Church preserved the writings of the ancients. While much of the ancient writings of much of the rest of the world has been lost, those of Greece and Rome have been preserved. The reason such writings of the classical age exist today is due solely to the efforts of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church came into existence in the classical age in a milieu influenced by the Greek culture and thought in a world dominated by the Roman Empire. The earliest converts to Catholicism were the Hellenistic Jews, who came from Jerusalem to celebrate Shavuot, which they called Pentecost. Many of the early church fathers were philosophers who found the truth of the Catholic Church compelling. They sought the truth and found it in the Catholic Church. These early church fathers engaged in apologetics and philosophical disputation with their pagan and agnostic contemporaries. Catholicism recognized that much good existed in the Greek and Roman thought and writings and used these to explain and defend the Catholic faith. The monasteries established scriptoriums where monks studied and copied the works of the classical age and the writings of the ancients. These classical works were taught in the monastic schools through which they provided education to their students. The body of Greek and Roman writings constituted the literature, history, philosophy, and science of the day. The works of Plato, Aristotle, Livy, Cicero, Tacitus, Terence, Homer, Sophocles, Lucid, Herodotus, and many others were preserved due to the monastic schools and scriptoriums run by the Catholic Church. As these monastic schools and the establishment of the cathedral schools became the centers of learning, scholars studied the ancient works which existed in their libraries and wrote commentaries and dissertations on the works of the ancients and engaged in disputations. These scholars, known as the scholastics, were the churchmen around whom students would gather and who would influence the creation of the university system. However, scholastics' greatest contribution was to philosophy and theology of the Catholic Church. It would be through the endeavors of the scholastics that the medieval period ended and Renaissance and humanism swept Central and Western Europe. It marked the transition of Western Europe into the modern age. The universities created an interest in studying the writings of the ancients, and this began to influence all spheres of human endeavor. What was once an activity of the scholastic churchmen now carried into the secular sphere, causing a transformation of society and culture. This was particularly true in Italy, where the Renaissance began, where over half of the early universities existed, most of which were created by the popes. The humanist spirit which marked the Renaissance would not have been possible without the church's effort to preserve the past. The Catholic Church created the healthcare system. Most early civilizations had developed some forms of primitive medicine. The shaman or the witch doctor was usually the dispenser of the treatments. Healthcare itself was virtually absent, as there was a general unsympathetic attitude towards sickness and death due to superstition and religious beliefs. Unlike the pagans, Christians, that is to say Catholics, had a very different attitude towards the sick and the dying, and this attitude changed the way in which the treatment of the sick and the dying occurred. Catholicism considers the care of the sick and dying and burying of the dead two of the seven corporeal works of mercy which all Christians should engage in. Many early converts to Christianity were physicians like St. Luke and the saints Cosmos and Dimian. The Catholic Church became the social safety net for the poor and the sick, paid for by the wealthier members of the society. The first hospitals came into being in the East and developed independently in the West Church. In the East, hospitals were created through the communities of Catholics coming together to provide healthcare services to the community members. In the West, most hospitals were created through monasteries and convents, which established Hotel Dior, meaning hostel of God, which took care of the sick and dying. These monasteries trained monks as physicians, preparation of remedies and the care of the sick, palliative and hospice care. Additionally, the Hotel Dior provided food and lodging to travelers, pilgrims, merchants, and traders. Some priests were trained as physicians and provided medical care to whom they served. The earliest such hospitals opened at the end of the 4th century. Saint Fabiola and Senator Pamalucius became a hospice for the pilgrims and the sick in 399 AD in Rome. Catholic military orders such as the Knights Hospitalitars and the Knights of St. John of Jerusalem built hospitals and infirmaries and provided care for the sick and the pilgrims. When the monasteries began establishing universities, they created schools of medicine to train physicians and apothecaries, some of whom were women. Convents provided hospice care for the dying. The Catholic clergy at the University of Salerno trained physicians for much of Europe. The Saint Maria Nuova in Florence, the largest hospital in the world at the time, provided care for 1,500 patients and had nuns trained as surgeons. Today, the Catholic Church maintains 5,500 hospitals, 18,000 clinics, and 16,000 elder care facilities, most of which are in the developing world, making the Catholic Church the largest provider of private health care in the world. However, Catholic health care is under threat across the developed world due to governments mandating hospitals to perform abortion, gender reassignment, sterilization, and euthanasia as services, all of which violate Catholic moral and ethical teaching. Many church-run hospitals have had to close their doors or transfer ownership to the state in many countries. Is the composition of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is composed of 24 sui juris churches. The Catholic Church is composed of 24 sui juris churches, each of which is a self-regulating and self-governing autonomous particular church that are in full communion with each other and recognize the Pope as the head of the church founded by Christ. Each of these churches traces its origins to one of the apostles or disciples of Christ, or established through the efforts of the church bishops in the ancient past. There is one Latin or Western Church and 23 Eastern churches, which make up the Catholic Church. Each rite which exists is Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, and the churches of the East has representation in the Catholic Church. Of these 7 are patriarchal churches headed by a patriarch, which includes the Latin Church. 4 are archiepiscopates, 5 are metropolitan sees, and 8 are eparchies or exparchites. Each church belongs to one of the 6 major rites, these being the Alexandrian Rite, the Armenian Rite, the Byzantine Rite, the Latin Rite, and the Eastern and Western Syriac rites. The 23 Eastern churches are ethno-national churches, reflecting every church rite found in the Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, and the churches of the East. These churches differ in their liturgies, the liturgical languages, theological understanding of doctrines and dogmas, canon laws, and disciplines. Each carries on the particular tradition handed down by an apostle or disciple. A few of the rites even celebrate the liturgy in the language spoken by Christ, which is Aramaic. Each Catholic church belongs to the church into which he is baptized into. While many Catholics may attend the liturgies of any of the sui juris churches into which they are not baptized, one cannot change their rite without receiving a dispensation from their bishop which permits such a change. What polity exists in the Catholic Church? The Catholic Church's government is a patriarchal monarchy. God is not only the Father, he is the Lord, the sovereign to whom Catholics owe their allegiance. Therefore, his vicar here on earth must reflect the same authority, and this is reflected in the giving of the keys of the kingdom to St. Peter. The Catholic Church is a reflection of the heavenly government here on earth, and this is reflected in its governance. As the Pope is both the Nasi and the Abiat Din of the Catholic Church, he is given both spiritual and temporal authority over the Catholic Church. While the Pope exercised spiritual authority as a father over the Church, his role as a temporal sovereign develops slowly throughout the ages. The donation of Pepin, the father of Charlemagne, officially provided de jure recognition of the de facto status of the Pope as the ruler of the Duchy of Rome, which later grew into the Papal States. Today, the Pope is recognized as the sovereign of the Holy See. The government of the Catholic Church is that of a patriarchal monarchy, where the Bishop of Rome, informally known as the Pope, acts both as a father and as a prince. The Catholic government operates on the principle of subsidiarity, where most issues are dealt with at the local church or parish level, with oversight of the diocesan bishop. If the issue is greater than what a particular bishop can deal with, a national synod of bishops or the bishops' conference in a territory may take it up. Rarely do issues make their way to the curial offices of the papal courts, and rarely still the Pope. Please do not forget to click the like button if you like the video. And please consider subscribing to our channel and to engage in the conversation by commenting. Please say a prayer for the repose of the soul of Ignatius, Deus Imperator's father, without whose love of the Catholic Church this presentation would not be possible. God bless you all.